very happy to have you all, and welcome to the final session of Wellness Day. We're very happy to have you all, and we're happy to have Kim here with us. So this session is called Parts of Me at the Bedside, How IFS, which is Internal Family Systems, can help healthcare team members find balance. And so just a few housekeeping notes before we start. This session will be recorded. And so if you have your camera on, or if you say anything in the meeting, it will be part of the recording. But we're really excited that Kim's here because she is the lead psychologist and founder of the Ottawa River Integrative Mental Health Incorporated, which is a hybrid group practice, which offers evidence-based psychology and psychotherapy, which focuses on well-being and growth. So she completed her training at McGill and then went down to Texas for her doctoral training, and then came back home up to Canada to complete her PhD. And so at Ottawa River, Kim integrates IFS, or Internal Family Systems, which is a non-dual mindfulness and compassion science in her work with clients and clinicians alike. And she's also a member of the International Plum Village Mindfulness Community. And she also hosts a podcast. So if you like her session today, you can connect with her podcast, The Art and Science of Thriving. And it's a podcast exploring how psychology and contemplative wisdom can support human flourishing. So thank you so much for being here, Kim. And now I'll pass the podium off to you.
Thanks so much, Brittany, and it's so good to be here with everyone. And all these fascinating speakers, I'm going to be calling all of you because the conversation just wants to continue. So thank you for this amazing day. And before I jump in, I just wanted to dedicate this practice to my father, who passed away a year and a half ago, and I was so excited that there was a palliative care community here because, of course, he was in palliative care. And I would say, listening to this series of talks, he was definitely the outlier, of an incredibly happy person. Like, literally, we had standing room only at his funeral. But didn't map onto any of the research. So I want all of you to feel encouraged when you hear I wrote this down. What hope do you have of accessing happiness when in the healthcare industry? And I thought, okay, maybe I'm the genetic outlier because of my father, but also I think there are practices and there are routes that we all have to absolutely accessing happiness, well-being, and growth. My father was my example. The care he received from the palliative care team just made all the difference to him and to the family. And so for me to be able to give a little bit of a pointer towards happiness for anyone who does this work is absolutely my joy. So there's a hit of happiness right there for me to be here with all of you. So you've probably all heard the quote from Albert Einstein that I'll summarize. It's not the exact words, but a problem is not solved at the same level of consciousness at which it is created. So I hope that this presentation will drop you to a different level of consciousness, because you can see that while we may do research, we may investigate, we work really hard. We're all such hard workers as healthcare providers, or we wouldn't be where we are. That level of consciousness might not get us there when it comes to bringing a spirit of joy and presence in these difficult situations which we face in our work lives, in our lives outside of work. And I hope to just point to something that is immediately available, that doesn't require a spa day, may not even require time off. I see Nadine is kind of smiling. You've sat courses with me. You know where I'm going here. So thank you so much for setting this up, because this is what the next 2 hours of practice is going to be about. I will say as a caveat, while I'll use some principles from internal family systems therapy today, this is not therapy. If you find that it really connects with you and you find it helpful, I can definitely connect you with someone to do this work. But what I want to offer are some practices and concepts drawn from IFS that I hope you can use to help you bring that spirit of spaciousness and calm and clarity to the work that you do every day. Now, that said, what I do is the best description I'd heard has been called upside down IFS. You know, so even if you're an IFS practitioner, I want to let you know, ask your therapist parts to step back and just stay with me, because this might not look like anything you've ever seen before, but you'll get it, I'm pretty sure. Not only have I been there where you are with my own family, but I have worked for many decades in hospital work. As was said in the introduction, I trained in hospitals in Texas, but I've also worked in pediatric hospitals in Canada, in Ontario, and now in our own outpatient clinic. And mostly I work with healthcare providers. So the outline for today we'll start out with some embodied practices. Then we'll focus mostly on connecting to what IFS called self as a caregiver or healthcare professional. Then I hope that we can play a little bit with understanding the parts that arise in our work as caregivers and healthcare professionals. And Nadine, I wanted to thank you, because actually, if you go back to the first session, Nadine was having people name what you, I think, referred to as metaphors. You know, what was the metaphor that you used? It was like the functional general or something.
The purposeful drill
The
sergeant.
purposeful drill sergeant. You know, so already you've been starting to do this IFS work, maybe without having the framework of IFS or self-to-part relationship. You all can recognize that we have kind of parts of consciousness that step up to help us. So you don't even need to study IFS to already see this in your own psyche. So what I want to point to today is that there is a quality that you already have, whole and complete, that's right here, and it's already who you are. So let's just start by unhooking from the level of thinking, those beautiful thinking parts of mind that have been here all day. Let's see if we can just unhook. And this practice today is going to be really about process, and process is the main goal here. And process is what some say is the union of the ultimate and the relative, like all of our conditioning, whether we're married, not married, whether we're a physician, a nurse, you know, they dance together in a way that's not linear. So just drop into where you are, and I hope you can experience and discover today what is true for you. And we'll start with some doorways that are really practical and available as healthcare providers. It's really this way of practicing is where the rubber meets the road, where external meets internal world. And I hope that it will give you an experience of shifting out of our relatively small thought-based mind. In the framework from which I work, thinking is just a sense door, the way smelling and hearing are. So we're shifting out of the thinking level of mind and that attention, focused, effortful, object-related kind of awareness into a different kind of awareness, a different kind of identity. And this is called awareness-based knowing. So just to help us make this transition, see if you can just sit back from your computer. You don't have to look at me either. Maybe look at the space around the computer and feel yourself dropping into your body. Kind of like being a Tai Chi master, you know, open, awake, and aware of the space within and without, feeling that. And we're going to experience what it's like to shift out of an object-oriented attentional system and rest in this panoramic embodied connection. So let's begin with what I'll call 3 breaths, 3 ways. So resting back into yourself, your own experience in your own place, no comparing to anyone else. And we'll start just with a 3-part breath. This is probably quite familiar to all of you. So inhaling through the chest, the belly, the rib cage, and then breathing out through a straw. And let's do that 2 more times. Inhaling through the nose, chest, belly, rib cage, and blowing out through a straw. And 1 more time, feeling the whole body. Just notice perhaps your body beginning to shift states. So this last one, let's make sure that our microphones are off, because this is a breath where we'll breathe in, and as we breathe out, I'd like you to just make a sound. And if your microphone is off, it can be like, oh shit, or whatever you want, whatever comes to mind. So just breathing in. And as you breathe out, ha, might be hum or om or yum. And breathe in through the nose again. And breathe out, all the way to the end of the breath. And 1 more time. And as you rest here, just notice a little bit if there's anything shifting, feeling the aliveness of the body. That's like a little massage that we did for the vagus nerve there on the hum or the yum or the om. And as you rest here, just let your eyes rest back in the sockets. Let your awareness expand and fill the whole room where you are. And these little practices will kind of give us a little map for what we're doing today. This next one I really like. So for this one, you just take your right hand and reach under your left armpit, kind of over your physical heart, and cross the left hand over, maybe grasping your bicep. And we'll just begin with a little self-to-part hug. Give a little squeeze, feeling the heel of your hand against your arm. And you're receiving a hug from something other than your small ass self. So you're both giving the hug and you're receiving the hug. And whether it's your general or your butterfly or your little helper parts coming up, any energy in the body, any anxiety, any thinking parts, just give them all a hug and let them know they're all welcome. And let them know they can rest here for the next hour or two. Maybe thank them for their hard work. And just know that there are no bad parts of mind here. Every part has a good intention to help. And resting here in this embrace where you're both giving and receiving at the same time. Settling into your body. And when you're ready, maybe come out and just rub your hands together. Get a little heat going here. And then letting your hands go, and maybe just, if your eyes closed, you can feel the other hand there. It might feel like magnets when you hold opposite ends of the magnet together. Might feel squishy like taffy. Just notice there's so much that your body knows. And then maybe take one hand and place it at the base of your neck. I have to get under my hair here. I call this holding the inner baby. So the way you would hold the head of a baby that can't hold up its own head. Reconnecting to this primary attachment. soothing our habitual fight or flight systems. And just letting your inner child know that all is well. We're coming home to our natural condition that has the capacity to be with whatever arises. And breathing in through the nose and breathing out through that straw again. Easy, gentle breath opening through the ribs. That slow, long exhale sends the signal to the nervous system that all is well. And if you like, letting the hands rest down on your lap, or if you want to rest one on your heart, just feeling the essential calm that is here. Resting but awake. Doesn't need to go to sleep to rest. Doesn't need to daydream or go to memory to just be interested and curious and here and now. So with your eyes open now, here's the last one. You can watch me do it once and then try it again yourself. So for this one, the smile goes up as we inhale, the eyes go up, the arms go up, send awareness out into the space and feel the space all around you, and then exhale, let it all go. Ha. Okay, so go ahead and try that 3 times. Smile up, eyes up, hands up, awareness out into the space all around, and ha, letting it go. And just try that 2 more times on your own time. Eyes up, smile up, hands up, awareness out into space. So just resting here, your eyes can be open. Just being aware of aliveness around us and inside us. Maybe aware of your consciousness forming into perspectives. And coming back to awareness of space and light without and within. Notice how you can be aware of all that is changing and moving. And for a moment, maybe noticing awareness being aware of itself. And just resting as that awareness. And see if you can notice the first movement of awareness into vibration in the body, sensation, feelings, thoughts, maybe even parts. And at the same time, you're aware of the spaciousness of the whole room all around your computer. And notice that it's the same awareness here and around you. This experience of awareness and aliveness are not two. Same taste. While they're multidimensional, they're interconnected, whole. And from here, maybe you can notice the breath at one point in your body. And from this field kind of awareness, you can know both that point and all around it. This is your big mind. So the invitation today is to find focus from this bigger mind that's all around and within your body. As if this oceanic kind of awareness was arising as your breath. And this wave is known by the ocean, the sky, and the water simultaneously. So see if you can let go of trying to figure out by using thinking mind, let go of particularizing or even any particular observer point of view. See if you can tune into that natural flow that is both local and also spacious. And notice in this field of spacious awareness, there's like a dancing of sounds. I'm hearing the sirens out on Bank Street in Ottawa, and sensations in your body, and parts. And all of this is welcome because there's so much space. There's nowhere that they need to go to find what they need. So we started with soothing the nervous system and connecting with the body and accessing some calm and clarity and relating to our parts rather than from them. And just let all your helpful thinker parts know everything will come. Knowing for now is going to come from self-leadership and this awake consciousness that doesn't just live up in our heads. So if you like, you can just stretch, move, see what your body wants to do. And it's just like you woke up from the best nap of your life. We don't, in the rest of today, need to go back to creating a thinker. We can just stay in this receptive mode. We don't need to check in with our brain mind. See if you can stay in this trusting and embodied awareness. So I trust you're getting a little experience of clarity with those opening practices. I just want to see if you could, staying in that state, type what you notice into chat. And Brittany is happy to read it out. What is here now? What do you say about this? And see if you can communicate from this open flow state. What's the difference between when we began and now?
So we're getting things like calm, open, spacious. Lots of these words over and over. Serenity.
Serenity. Yeah.
More aware of my body than my mind.
More aware of my body than my mind.
It was hard to quiet my thinker, someone
Yeah, a
said.
lot of people think they have to squash the thinker, and the thinker is part of all of this. We just want to relate to the thinker from a different space. Thank you.
And we also had soothe the inner child.
Soothe the inner child. Yeah. So I just want to get a sense of whether you've had this experience before.
Janae said the hug was really warm and loving.
The hug was warm and loving. Yeah, giving and receiving at the same time, both the host and the guest, it said. Yeah. So what we're pointing to here is what has been described as a flow state. You know, there's a deep engagement, not just cognitive level engagement or attention, but this was and I always get this guy's name, Dr. Bloom did it beautifully. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, I think it is, something like that. He was one of the first researchers to study flow states. What I would like to go into next, we will unpack a little bit more of the flow state research later, but I want to point out that already everyone here, flow states are supposed to come more easily with experts who have 10,000 hours of practice, and I'm quite sure everyone here has 10,000 hours of practice already accumulated in your experience, not only being a human, but also being a healthcare team member. you know. When you come into a room with a patient in palliative care, you have 10,000 hours of knowing how to be with this in some way or another because you have lived a human life. So let's move into a little bit more about flow experience. I promised you that this was going to be something you already have and that's available to you, and we'll be exploring ways that we could go into this as a resource that doesn't require any particular practice or skill set, but everyone has their own doorway of how to go into this state. And this state is not narrow attentional focus, it's more of an engaged focus. So there's a clarity. Maybe you have moments like this in your work where you just know what needs to be done and then you do this thing. And there is what is called a hypofrontality, that is the executive function goes offline and you're in an absorbed state. You might kind of wake up and go, whoa, where did the time go? So there is a time distortion in the now, and there's plenty of time. And what was the term Dr. Bloom used? It was like a plurality of motivation. Yeah, I love that because this is actually a great description of flow states. It's its own reward. And what works for someone else might not be the doorway for you, but there is a plurality of motivation. And it's its own reward when you're in a flow state. So when you're in a flow, even a boring activity is fun. And when you're in the flow state, it's like meditation in action, so you can engage in a way that is optimally functioning and it's kind of optimally fun. Like I heard earlier, the sharing the dad jokes, and if anyone's been in healthcare, the kind of what they call gallows humor that can come up. Like you're actually in this really difficult situation and there's actually a joy and fun that can be there at the same time. So that's a flow state. And actually being optimally functioning is really fun. So in this next little glimpse, we'll just point out that you already have the essential healing element that we talk about in IFS that is whole and complete. So who is this who is doing this workshop right now? And what is this awareness that's the foundation of your mind and the foundation itself? In a lot of the traditions that talk about this level of consciousness, they say it's so subtle you can't understand it with your habitual way of knowing. We have to transition out of our mental survival brain, so we have to learn how to let go, and we know it when we are it. So it's also said it's so simple that we can't believe it. We have minds that like to make things complicated. We want to have a solution and a method and 5 steps, and when you're in it, it seems too simple. It's said that it's so good you can't believe it. But it's actually who you are. It's a developmental stage that we can live from, that you all have the capacity to move towards. And when you have you in your life had a peak experience, you probably know this mind state. It's often something that we access when we go do something that we love in our free time, right? So think of what you love to do in your free time, and you notice that we just drop out of our mind and we become totally engaged in the activity. Some of you might find it in nature. I can find it through my dog, those big brown retriever eyes looking at me in the morning. You might find it in your kids or in gardening, or as we've named, sometimes it's not pleasant. It might be ultra marathons or ice climbing, or dropping into a freezing lake from a helicopter, as one of our first presenters talked about. These are not the entry points for everybody, but the state of mind, the awake, loving flow state, this state is our natural condition. So in this little practice, I want you to bring to mind, we're trying to find the easiest doorways for everyone here. So finding your own flow door is a great starting point. Think of what do you do, a peak experience or a regular activity, or it might be a common situation or a place or a community. And everyone has some door, some activity that is their easy way into flow. So let's start here and see if we can access that. And we can take that mind state to all activities, whether they're simple or moderately difficult or complex. And most of you will know this doorway is a great way to begin practice. So you know this awake, fun, connected thing. So have you brought to mind something? And I want to be clear, it's not the doorway itself. This is why how much you earn, or whether you have a long commute, or even how challenging your workplace is. That's not necessarily stress, as our first presenter talked about, but neither is, the way to happiness and joy. It's everyone has a different doorway. So we're going to do this as a guided meditation using visualization. So I want you to choose one time when you were in your flow state activity. And you can close your eyes or leave your eyes open, but enter into that activity completely. For me, I love rowing on the Ottawa River, and I actually can't row now, but I can bring to mind the full experience just like that. So what is this experience you can bring to mind and really flesh it out in all your senses? And you may have some parts that have opinions about this exercise, and if they're trying to help, just notice and acknowledge them and thank them, and just ask them if they'll soften back for a few minutes. You're just going to go have some fun, and you'll be right back. So see the colors, the sense of smell, the scenery. Enter it fully through your mind's eye. And look around at the situation as if you're seeing through your own eyes. When you're in this, you're fully alive and joyful and connected and open, free from self-consciousness and worry. You might have a sense of fearlessness and open-heartedness and joy. So just allow the juiciness of this experience and the essential wakefulness to be felt in your body. And know what has been revealed to you and known by you. Feel the qualities that are here when you're in this activity. Feel who you are when you're in this activity. This sense of self, of natural wakefulness and freedom. And if there are parts or here, that's okay. You're taking a view that embraces all parts that arise. You feel who you are that has been revealed in this scene, this activity. And maybe feel gratitude for this journey as you let the scene fade in your mind's eye. And yet notice that the qualities are still here. Let the scene dissolve as you come into this present moment. And as that scene fades, stay with the being who was there, who is here now. I want you to notice who was there then that is here now. Who could be at any place and at any time. And was that a meditative state or a revelation of who I naturally am? Your parts can be there and receive the welcoming presence of who's here now. And really feel that who was there, who is here now, coming into your body. And just familiarize yourself with who's here now. Maybe opening up to all your senses. And you can stay home by being dropped down and open. Just let this memory of this flow door for you be like a guidepost or a touchstone. You can do everyday activities with this state of mind and then let them go. You can really feel the sense of not needing to reside in the next session, next second, or the next self-referential thought. And just be curious about what's the potential for flow in your everyday life. Notice the qualities of flow that you already have. There's timelessness, a non-ego-centered manager. You're not asleep nor dumbed down. Could you think, move, act within this space of mind? Feeling your identity and your mind and awareness, while you're also feeling a wider field. So just rest in this receptive state. And what do you say about this new view of things, the new you who's here now? Go ahead and type that into the chat with Brittany. Staying in flow, see if you can type in flow. You don't have to think about typing, right? The body just knows how to do this. You are not a couch potato, neither are you overactive. Just calm, clear, active, focusing. What do you get, Brittany?
Someone says she's so still, aligned and all connected up. Someone said feels strong.
Still, aligned, connected up, strong.
Quiet.
Yeah, yeah. Quiet.
Mm. All my parts in the right place, centered, free and connected. Sad.
Yeah. All parts are welcome. Yeah.
Relaxed and happy. Clarity. Curious, like when I was a kid.
Curious, like when I was a kid. Yeah. Yeah. So just notice these are qualities that you have here and now. It's easy for us to access them when we are in our flow experience. And I just want to welcome all experiences in this space of effortless focus and flow. You know, parts are welcome in this space of self-energy, as we call it in IFS. And I want to point out that the qualities of the mind in the person who had your experience are here and now. I'm definitely not in a rowboat on the Ottawa River at this moment. And yet, when I let that experience fade, notice those qualities of self are still here and available. And this is available to you at any time. Doesn't require going to the mountains of Himalayas or even running 50 kilometers in the cold, you know. You can definitely go and do that if that's your doorway, but I want to be clear that these doorways are not the only way. This is more a quality of mind in this perspective that I'm talking about. Just want to spend a couple minutes for the thinking parts. We love you. Talking a bit about the science of flow. You've had the experience now, but this little experience was shifting into what we call a hypoegoic state of mind. So Nakamura and Csikszentmihalyi in 2012 defined flow as having these 6 defining attributes and see if you can notice any of those in that experience that we just had. So high concentration, not thinking, but high concentration, emerging of action and awareness. Notice the self-referential narrative is quite quiet, so there's a loss of self-consciousness. A sense of control. Sometimes there's a distorted temporal experience, like contraction or expansion, and it's autotelic, so a form of motivation that just has pleasure and satisfaction in the process of doing. What do we know about the science of flow? Well, we know that flow proneness is associated with good mental and cardiovascular health. Flow proneness can serve as a protective factor against mental and somatic health issues. Individuals with higher flow proneness have a reduced risk of developing anxiety and sad moods, indicating that flow experiences may act as a buffer against depression over time. Not that they'll eliminate sadness. The whole point is not to constrict the emotional range that's available to you, but just to buffer against going into that self-referential loop that's associated with a higher risk for depression. Van der Linden, Tops, and Baker noted that a state of full task absorption accompanied with a strong drive and low levels of self-referential thinking. So see if that matches up with that experience of remembering your own flow state. There's an ideal match between the person's skills and a task challenge. Now, I see majority healthcare providers in my own practice, and there is actually such joy I've witnessed and heard about from many providers about that moment of being able to, say, run a code and really make a difference, or connect to a patient who needs something and what it is that has to be done. So if we could put you in an fMRI while you were doing that, probably what we would see is this interaction between three large-scale attentional networks: the default mode network, central executive network, and the salience network. So all of these play a role in strong task engagement, that low self-referential thinking, the autotelic feedback, and the feelings of control in flow. In a systematic review examining the association between flow and burnout symptoms, they found a negative correlation between flow and burnout symptoms, suggesting flow is a protective factor. And conversely, burnout symptoms can inhibit the ability to experience flow. Now, as a healthcare provider for 30 years, I definitely contacted territories of burnout. So just see what's true for you. Know that the flow experiences can reduce the impact of stress, but also notice our systems kind of shut down. In IFS, we would say like the firefighters won't let the self-energy in. So we're going to talk a little bit about other doorways to flow. There's so many doorways, and often when we find a doorway, we think that this doorway, whether it's knitting or my choir group or meditation or the vacation that I've been planning, that these are the only way, that they're the source of the state. And what I can say, both the research and my clinical work has shown that this really is not the case, that flow is a quality of your mind. This is what's brilliant about it, is it's always available to you. Your mind is available to you. I would go as far to say flow is your true nature. Flow is who you are. How do we connect with flow? Well, I think it's really important that we all find as many doorways as we can. And just like some of the research on exercise, it's not just massed practice. Like you don't need to, like I said, go to a cave in the Himalayas and meditate, but it can be the cumulative benefit of many small glimpses many times. And as we unhook from the thinking level of consciousness to just being as awareness, no effort, out of that survival mindset, just resting in awake space, we can do and be from a different state of consciousness as we go back to that first quote from Einstein. The solution doesn't come from the same level of consciousness at which a problem was created. So we will go into some IFS practices and maybe a couple more. There's so many more practices I could teach you, but the whole idea is that you find little glimpses that work for you, and then you can, my teacher calls this going to the solution and looking at the problem from there. You're going to this source level of consciousness and then taking a different viewpoint on whatever is happening in your life. And some of the strategies that have been mentioned earlier might be things that are still available to you. You might still do those, but where you do them from is what makes all the difference, right? Are you doing it from a mind state where you're trying to fix yourself or solve the problem of your life, or counter a narrative, that some ancestor gave you? These are all helpful, but they're all part state of consciousness, right? So I'm inviting everyone to practice going to the solution and looking at the problem from there using these practices. Let me see. I want to just talk a little bit about this flow state of mind. In internal family systems, this is referred to as self-leadership. And for the IFS folks in the group, I mentioned I kind of teach an upside down IFS, where they often start with parts work, and then as the parts settle back, there's these qualities of self that emerge. Self is always here. We all have a doorway. I have to say, this hasn't been proven wrong, and I've been working in the field for over 30 years, and I began work with what used to be called severely emotionally disturbed kids. It was down in the US, and they were all shipped out of state because they were considered too difficult to be served in their own communities. And I was part of this beautiful project called the Wraparound Program, funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And it was a strengths-based project. And so I got to work with these kids who, for all intents and purposes, people had given up on. But we would go in and try and find what is the strength that we can build and how can we reconnect them to their communities. And I would say to a person, they all had this quality, or some of the qualities of self-leadership that I'll describe here. So in IFS, the self is the core, undamaged, essential nature of a person that is characterized by these 8 C's. And just see how many of these were in that flow state that you noticed, that person who was doing the activity that you loved. Compassion, curiosity, calm, clarity, courage, confidence, creativity, connectedness. So the self is not a part that needs fixing, but rather is the true wise center of a person that's always present, even when it's overshadowed by the parts, or what some people call ego states or subpersonalities or social mentalities, depending on the theoretical framework you're coming from in psychology. But essentially, these parts carry burdens from past experiences. They were very necessary. Often they helped us survive a difficult experience or a trauma, helped us get through grad school, helped us get through a difficult job or a difficult boss or a difficult case. But often their agendas, their knowledge is limited. So accessing self allows a person to lead their life with wisdom and help other parts of them heal. So some of the characteristics of self are that it's always present. It's not something that you have to earn or develop or create. It always exists within everyone, even if it's been hidden by trauma or conditions. It's calm and unburdened. So unlike other parts that carry pain, the self is a source of calm and clarity and acceptance. It's a natural leader. So self naturally leads your internal family system, guiding your parts with kindness and wisdom. And it's also a state of being, a state that can be experienced as a sense of peace, inner warmth, or clarity. So how do we connect with self? You probably have manager parts right now going, okay, this all seems really nice, maybe a little woo woo, but like, what do I do? I work a tough job. I'm trying to survive here, you know. And I just want to say thank you so much for your parts. We have exactly the same agenda. We want you to survive. We want you to be safe. We want you to be free. And the way that we're going to get there might not be what you think. What was that great quote by Paul? Dr. Bloom said, "Nothing is as serious as it is when you're thinking about it." I love that. It's a perfect example of a thinking part, right? Who takes things very seriously. And the thinking part, its whole job of our thinking mind is to scan the world for problems, to identify solutions, and to create a narrative or a self that can solve those, right? I see Nadine nodding. Yeah, default mode network. That's what it does. But when we connect with self, we have a lot of doorways. One doorway in is unblending from your parts. So a lot of you notice that just naming your parts, as you did with Nadine today, it's like often a first step, because if you can name it, then you're not necessarily 100% inside it, are you? That's called unblending in IFS. So we can unblend from other parts just to create some space. And just like in a conversation, if someone's really up in your face, it's hard to get to know them, right? If they're really up in your face. So if our parts will soften back, if we can name them, invite them to give a little space, then often this allows the qualities of self that we identified in your flow door to emerge. Through practices. So some people like to use meditation or prayer or contemplative or spiritual practices to connect with self. That might not be your jam. It might not be your doorway at all. In moments of insight in your life, maybe any time you felt peace or inner warmth, or maybe have a light bulb moment of insight, it can be popping out of a part and having an experience of your own self energy. And living in a flow state. Whatever your flow door is a great way to connect with self. So I'll bet you didn't know you are already practicing internal family systems. And everything that we've talked about today, you can see fits into this framework. It's so useful. This is why I think, Carl, it was genius how you ordered things. I just want to say that we're going to really do some practices getting to know our parts in the next half hour or so, and then we'll open to more questions. But I want to drop back into that state of mind that you were in earlier. Just know it's still here and available. And notice that all these arising of part consciousnesses, is like having guests in a guest house. The self is the home, and this being human is a guest house. Every morning is a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes like an unexpected visitor. And here's the challenge for us all. Welcome and entertain them all. The part that's pissed off about the way the colleague interacted with you, the part that's heartbroken when they see a family fighting right in the last moments of a life passing. I know that you've all seen these things because I work with you all day long, right? So even if there are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest, each part of you honorably. She may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door, laughing, and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So that's the invitation. Let's go into another practice that I'll call the U-turn. So this is something you can do eyes open or eyes closed. And I just want to point out that this I that we all call ourselves it's been described by neuroscientists as the conductor who appears when the orchestra starts playing, right? It's not a thing, right? It's a pattern of thought. It's from our small mind, the thinking mind, and it takes itself to be the subject of your life. Am, when we say I am aware, the am part is currently connected to the I of the small self instead of to this spacious awareness that we've been pointing to. So we're not talking about awake awareness simply as attention, or what we think of as this kind of gradual mindfulness where you have to control your attention and not engage in thinking. Rather, awake awareness is a foundation of who we are, and seeing in a particular sense, I am aware of my computer here, and the computer is the object. So subject, object, the scene, and very often we use awareness as attention. I am aware of my computer. But what happens when we turn this awareness around, and this is why this practice is called a U-turn, when the awareness looks back and sees that small S self, and discovers that awake awareness is not where I am is located. So as you're listening to me, just become aware of the part of you that's trying to figure out these words. Or maybe as you're looking at the computer, be aware of your computer in front of you. And notice any feeling of going out from your eyes towards an object. We're playing with subject-object right now. And feel the process of I am seeing this object, my computer. Now let awake awareness unhook and move backwards to be aware of the space directly between you and your computer. Notice you can be aware of that space between you and your computer. And then maybe let it move back farther and let it be aware of the space between your ears. And notice the absence of a focuser or a thinker or a small s self. And now let local awareness rest back behind your body into the space behind you and feel the space behind you. And as local awareness rests back behind your body, notice that spacious, awake awareness is already aware. So look from awake awareness. Am I aware of spacious awareness, or am I aware from the spacious awareness? Now notice awake awareness as being alert, thought-free, open, and here. And notice the awareness that is behind your body. And as this awake awareness, feel forward through your body to be connected with the computer. So notice that the awake awareness that you're aware from is not located in your head. It's not a mindful witness. Just feel from the open field of awake awareness, which is equally outside and inside. And it's just arising as this changing experience of aliveness in your body. So from this awareness, there's nothing to do, there's nowhere to go. Just be here without orienting to thought, to be alert. Just welcoming everything without analyzing or particularizing. be here, undistracted, without effort. And just with some curiosity, let's just drop in these questions without going up to the head office of thinking. Who am I? What am I? Where am I aware from? So this is just a little shift from shifting from small f, s, self, to where these qualities of big S, self, emerge. And this goal is totally possible. You can do it if you like. You can just relax into it without effort. There's a balance here between it being both doable and challenging. It's definitely a switch of a channel of consciousness from which you're operating for most of us. So in this awake awareness, I want you to just play with this in your life in whatever way, It is possible to do this and to live a life that you only dreamed of, but is actually, you've already had glimpses of it in your day-to-day life. And it could be the next natural stage in your life that you operate from this state of mind. So looking at the time, I just want to offer a little bit of time, like knowing from this space of awake awareness of how do the parts fit into that. We think of parts that can be like the clouds that obscure our already awake and loving nature, and often they take the form of hurt parts of us. And the mantra that we have in internal family systems work is there's no such thing as a bad part, just parts that are trying to find safety and love. So there are different parts that fit into distinct categories, and I want you to just think of yourself. For the purposes of this workshop, we're talking about how our healthcare provider parts or healthcare teams can benefit from IFS. So maybe think of work parts. First we thank them for all the hard work that they do, and I thank them from the depths of self, and for my daughter parts for all that you've done for my family and for my father. But each of our parts have different reasons for being. So I just want to name them, and you can see of what you connect with in your own system. So in IFS work, we have 4 goals. So first, it's to liberate parts from the roles they've been forced into, and it's often because we had to, we get a very conscientious manager, many of us, because that's what we had to do in order to, move out, live on our own, create the life that we want. But then sometimes the way they got us to move out, to live on our own and create the life that they want becomes actually the limitation that keeps us from living joyfully and without excessive stress. So we want to liberate parts from the roles that they have been in and free them to become who they were designed to be. Very often parts, because of trauma or past experience or stress, don't really believe that they can stop doing their role or even soften back on it because they don't really believe self is here. Now, I hope you all had a little taste of that, so you can just show your parts, look, self energy is here. They don't know that their job can evolve or that they don't need to be stuck in a different time and place because they don't know they can trust self to guide them on that journey. And the intention with this work is to reharmonize the inner system, to reduce polarization, and to encourage participants to become self-led in their interactions. So here's just a few little examples. You probably have some of your own. These are all fictionalized examples. Like I said, I work with healthcare providers, but these are all experiences or amalgams of experiences that people have told me about. Imagine a young Indigenous physician in his first role, noticing that the administrators address him by his first name in front of patients while they address an older non-Indigenous physician as doctor. Maybe you've had parts that have had that example, you know, being treated differently or marginalized in some way. Here's another one. A 60-year-old patient completes an entire encounter with a female physician, receiving a prescription and a treatment plan. At the end of the encounter, he asks, "Now, when will the doctor see me?" you know, Not able to see the caring person right in front of them. So just noticing like what parts of you would come up with that. Or maybe you're having your own parts telling you stories. Um, a very experienced healthcare provider has repeated intrusive traumatic images of the way they have been bullied and criticized and undermined by colleagues in the workplace. Now one of the bullies is promoted to a senior leadership position. Just noticing what parts come up there. And here's the last one. A healthcare professional feels he cannot speak to his family about some of his traumatic memories from cases at work, so he sits alone in his basement and listens to old LPs in the dark to make himself feel better. Very helpful parts there. So maybe you have your own parts that are showing examples. Here's the first and most common kind of part, and we tend to love them and get super identified with them. And I want to point out that they're a part. So our inner managers are protective parts, and their whole goal is to prevent exiled parts, like the tender, sweet, maybe young parts. They've been sent away, for safety in any war zone. We want to make sure the children are sent away for safety. The same thing happens in the psyche. So managers are to prevent exiled parts from being triggered and to maintain a sense of control and safety. So manager parts often manifest as perfectionism, self-criticism. They have like really rigid rules about how they like things to be, or fears about what will happen if things aren't according to the rules, or overachievement. A great way to keep yourself safe is to, work hard to make everyone love you. So managers often develop as coping strategies in response to difficult life circumstances. So it's really, really important that we offer them some gratitude. I'm going to just check with Brittany if maybe looking with insight into your own system, if you notice any managers that you can really appreciate that maybe got you to where you are, but like keep you from getting to a state of ease and happiness.
I have a caregiver part.
Ah, yeah, thank you for your caregiver part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, we want to really offer so much gratitude and welcome to our different parts. And so many of us as healthcare providers have a caregiver part, don't we? That really learned how to do that as a way to manage our system. So, just with a lot of compassion and self energy, I invite you to look into your system and name any manager parts. The next category of parts that we may find coming up at the bedside are inner exiles. So these are parts that carry emotional pain, traumatic memories, or vulnerable emotions. And very often they're younger parts that maybe experience pain or unmet needs. Exiles are typically pushed away from awareness and are hidden to protect you from re-experiencing the pain that was associated with them when they originally came into your system. And I can't tell you how many 6-year-old exiles are running surgery suites or maybe, driving the truck. You might see them in other people. Like very often when we have conflicts, it's because our parts have a polarization with someone else's parts. But the best thing for us to do is to look inside and invite these exiles to know that they have a home with you forever. I have quite an affection for inner firefighters. Maybe it comes from working with those kids 30 years ago, where they would, I remember one day coming home from work and a kid had punched a locker at a school right next to my head, and my supervisor was very upset. And I was like, they were like, you need to stop working with this kid. And I'm like, no way am I going to stop working with this kid. And she said, well, why not? He punched the locker right next to your head. And I said, he didn't punch my head. That's what I noticed. There was a firefighter for sure that was really distressed and trying to let me know that he was distressed, but there was enough self energy that he wasn't going to hit me. He knew I was his friend, you know. So firefighters often are the ones that kind of get us in trouble. They're the ones who develop a gambling addiction, or maybe they're eating a pint of ice cream every night, they're often reactive parts, but they only come out when the pain of exiles has been activated and your system is quite overwhelmed by intense emotions or memories. So, on a subtle level, I notice a lot of us as healthcare providers will distract or numb us out, might be through that extra bottle of wine. I remember it was actually just recently, there was a colleague who was dealing with a crisis situation, and I had to come in after work to help them manage it. And then I checked in with them the next day and they said, it was really interesting because I had a choice. There was a part of me that said, is LCBO still open? Because I totally want to go and just get a big bottle of whiskey, But instead I didn't do that. I went home and I cuddled my kids, So that's a firefighter who is responding to self-leadership, right? It was like, I want to make you feel better by giving you a big bottle of whiskey, but actually self said, well, how about you soothe yourself in other ways, So when they're not attached or connected in a loving relationship with self, firefighters often provide temporary relief, but they can contribute to long-term negative consequences. Now, I mentioned earlier that sometimes we notice other people's parts and then there's a polarization there, but we also have parts within us. I think earlier someone said, there's a part of me that feels guilty when I take care of myself, right? And, pick me too. This is a common polarization within us as healthcare providers. Our caregiver parts are working hard and they're like giving to other people. We tend to be givers. And then when we take just a little bit, which would be a very self-led thing to do, right? Then there's a part that says that's not good. There's the polarization there. So a polarization is when two parts or groups of parts in a system oppose or compete with each other. So a power struggle between parts can become so intense that it might be that your inner system feels kind of just stuck, where you literally are like vibrating, and there's that polarized energy between parts, or they might flip back and forth, like one part takes over, no, I have to sacrifice myself. Another part takes over, fuck it all. There can be really a tug of war. And your poor system is kind of at the mercy of parts who are each jumping in and out of the driver's seat. So if access to self-energy is constrained, like we just are too exhausted, there's too much burden, we can't get into self-energy, then very often parts will jump in and try and drive the bus, so to speak. And this is not bad. It's just we need to understand that the parts are working really hard. So often when we do this inner work, we're being what one of my teachers has called a hope merchant. We're offering the opportunity for our system to maybe work a little less hard, maybe shift their job. Parts work at the bedside. Now, if anyone tells you they've never been triggered by a patient or a colleague at work, then I tell you they're lying. We as humans, when we interact, will all get triggered, even if it's just a little bit at some point. And this is a great doorway. One of my mentors has called this an opportunity to learn from a Tor mentor, that they are here to help us understand what needs to be healed in our system and how to return to self-leadership. So very often we discover a polarization or, a part that we were not aware of through a triggering event at work. So this is an event that's happening in the present, but it might be superficially similar. It might even just be in terms of the mindset that you're in, that it makes you feel. An event in the past that was too overwhelming. So even though the experiences in the past were really real when they happened, they're not actually happening in the present. I'm thinking of a healthcare provider I worked with who had a very, very abusive father, and they had a particular specialty that required very fine focus, and attention as they were putting in the line, you know. But if anyone commented, there was part of them that heard that, like in the voice of the father. It wasn't just a colleague saying, like, hey, do you think that's really aligned correctly? It was a full-on experience of having the critical father there. So that's an example of a part that gets activated. And the parts are not us that we are now, but when they triggered, they feel and act like they are. So this person had incredible rage, like, how dare this person comment on the alignment of my line as I'm doing the insertion, But if we recognize this as a part and we can relate to this part, like I said, go to the solution and look at the problem from there, from the viewpoint of self and the self energy that you all know that you can access in some way. If we treat our parts like they're only thoughts or feelings arising, maybe you've gone to do some really good CBT, then they might go away for a little while. Oh, that's an irrational thought, and it might go away. But if we don't really understand and relate to that part of consciousness with love and an understanding of where they came from, then they tend to come back, in my experience. So I know there's probably parts here saying, well, how do I do this? So I want to just point out, this is called parts mapping. Before I go into this, I just want to check with Brittany and see if there are any questions so far about managers, firefighters, polarization. This is a ton. You're getting like a little tiny crash course in IFS, but I just want you to take what makes sense for you and see how you can use it to help your whole system work a little less hard, your sweet, hardworking systems.
I think they're making comments about their different parts that are coming up. So I think you're doing a wonderful job of explaining the different groupings. So yeah,
Wonderful. So everyone
yeah.
can notice, oh yeah, I think I know that's a little firefighter. Firefighters are soothers, right? They're not always really extreme. They can be subtle, and we can quite like them. Managers, we tend to be very identified with managers. It can be very hard to unblend from them because we think that we need to manage and control ourselves in order to live a happy life, right? So what we're offering here is a self-to-part relationship of trust with your true nature. And all of these parts, as I said at the beginning, the ultimate and the relative are in a dance. You have both this like amazing, unconditioned, loving, awake, aware, curious, kind, compassionate awareness, and we have parts because we're surviving in the world. We're humans that encounter threat and deprivation and loss. So here's a parts mapping way from IFS. So this is more traditional IFS than the upside down IFS I started teaching you. I'd like you to bring to mind, maybe think of the managers. We want to not get too deep here, and we don't want to let any part of your system feel like we're trying to knock them out of their seats or kick them off the team. We never kick parts off a team. We just let them know, I have a job upgrade for you, much better pay, much more vacation, and you can semi-retire. This is all we're offering, much better job. So if you had maybe a little manager part, see if you can find that part if you were reflecting on moments when maybe you were in a triggering situation at work. And just listen for a thought. I had a part that popped in one day, and this part said, fuck everybody. Oh, okay. You're a kind helper, and here you are saying, fuck everybody. But I know you've probably had a part that was really frustrated and has done something like that too. So just listen for a part. It might show up as a thought. It might be a feeling, might be a gesture. Has anyone had the experience of like their parent's voice coming out of their mouth unexpectedly? You know, I see Carl laughing. You know, it might be a gesture, it might be a kind of energy that you bring to a certain situation or a word, and see if you can locate this part in your body. And what we want to do, this is part of the U-turn, is like from that awake awareness of self, focus in on this specific part. It might be a place in your body. And as we pay attention, you know, these parts are communicating to us all the time. It might be through a contracted muscle, it might be through an urge to do something, it might be through an image or a fantasy. So see if you can notice how you feel this part in your body when it comes up. And we're just trying to turn on all the channels of communication that this part of us can send messages to us through. Are there any thoughts or emotions that emerge as you reflect on this part? And you might want to see how far are you from that part. Like I said, sometimes, you know, if a part's really hijacking our amygdala and taking us over, it's kind of hard to have a conversation. So we may invite the part, could you just soften back a bit? I can like hear you better and see you better if you step back 2 steps, you know. And it might feel pretty strange because we might be quite identified with that part, particularly if it has, you know, gotten us a lot of what we perceive to be of value in our lives. It's kind of scary to step back. Just let it know we're not sending it off the team. We just are trying to get a good insight into it. And sometimes you can ask a part, rather than saying, how old do you think it is? That's going up to thinking. I like to kind of imagine asking the part, how old do you think I am? And without going to thought, very often, this is why I said you'd be surprised how many 6-year-olds who are running departments, you know, they don't actually know how capable you are or what capacities you have or what your resources are. They're not really living in the present moment, you know. And that's not their fault, but we just want to start building a relationship with these parts of consciousness. Like I said, we're not trying to, you know, therapize them to death or meditate them to death or try to get rid of them or shut them down. We're trying to build a relationship. So just see how you feel towards this part. You know, often there's another part that's quite irritated. Well, why do you get burned out? You know, that's a part. We'll ask that to step back and just check for self-energy, those 8 C's that we talked about. And see if you can go to the solution and relate to this part, this problematic part from there, and be really curious. Ask this part of you, what would you like to tell me? Tell me about your job. Very often they're very hardworking parts that just want us to be safe, and they've learned that this is the one thing I can do. You can kind of tell apart because it has an agenda. They have a job and they're really good at it. So we want to understand what its role and purpose is, you know. And then the question that often is kind of the inflection point for these parts is to just ask this often it's a young part of you, what are you afraid would happen if you let go of doing your job? You know, what do you think would happen if you stop pushing yourself so hard at work? You know, and they're very often well intentioned, you know. A common fear of parts with many healthcare providers I work with is, well, like somebody will die. You know, if I'm not really vigilant, someone's going to die. And we say, thank you so much. Like, we want everybody to be safe too. You know, we might need to do some work of trusting self. We want everyone to be safe. And, sweetheart, we will all die. It's not anybody's fault. You know, so just kind of doing some work with parts is that death is not failure. You know, you all know that from the work that you do, you know. So whatever the fear is, we don't try and talk the part out of it. We just want to understand and also allow it to rest and trust in self, knowing that it doesn't need to work so hard. We're not going to do this today because we have just about 10-15 minutes yet. But if you want to practice this on your own, I'll describe this exercise. This is what in IFS circles we call a fire drill. And I remember the first time I did this, it just cracked me up because I was definitely triggered. It was some young people right outside my house who were like revving their hot rod car really, really loudly, you know. And I was like trying to listen to my music with my partner inside, and they're revving. So I went out. I was definitely in a part. I was in like a big mom part, you know. And I'm gonna like make you behave. And like you can guess how well that works. It was pretty funny for them. So set the scene. If it's okay, that we're not working with anything that's really big here. Visualize the scene and imagine the person who triggers you. And then just like you're watching yourself through a window, like watch what part of you comes up and notice how it feels in your body. You know, I was really loaded for bear going out there, definitely in a mama bear part, you know. And this is usually a protector. So in your mind's eye, see if you can invite that protector to step back from this safe vantage point, letting the protective part know that self-energy is here. That self-energy that you all have access to do, and just ask this part if it would be willing to let self lead on this one. And then just notice what change happens in your mind and physiology. If you can just invite the protector to step back a bit and let self lead in this one. You know, I would say if I'd gone into that situation with self-leadership, I probably would have had much better outcomes and it would have been much less stressful, you know. So with your situation, just notice if self was to lead, if you were in the flow state of mind, what is different? What do you observe in your body and thoughts now? If the protector part is less, you know, hijacking the brain. And this can be really interesting to, you know, bring this to your relationships. You know, see if you can let self lead in the interaction with the relationship, whether it's a patient or a colleague or someone in your family, you know, and maybe run this scenario in your own mind. You know, how might it be for self to lead in this situation? And when you're ready, just thank your protectors always. It's so important that we offer gratitude. We talked earlier about the importance of gratitude. In my experience, the importance of gratitude is it softens all of these protective, reactive parts of us and allows self to come forward. It's not the practice of gratitude per se, it's the effect on the system and how it allows this quality of mind to emerge. So just bringing it home now. Just checking in with my own presenter parts here. Let's do one more practice and then we'll go up to thinking. So my intention with this is to kind of bring you up the mountain. If you've seen like the ox herding pictures in Zen, you kind of go up the mountain and there's this like contact with awakening, but then you come back down the mountain and you're living in the village again. So we've today just stacked these experiences together so that you can bring this into the village, so to speak, of everyday life. And when we look at the ox herding pictures about this, go up to the mountain, experience nirvana, and then come back down. There's an image where he comes back to the village with gift-bearing hands, you know. So I want to invite you to just in our last practice, unhook again from the I with this little who am I exercise, and then see if you can bring this quality of mind into your gift-bearing hands as you're doing this work in palliative care at home and in your life. And here's the little practice. I want you to say, I am aware of being, and then say your name. Your mics are off, so it's okay. Just say it out loud. I am aware of being Kim. Now let go of your name. I am aware of being. And just feel this. Now say and feel, I am aware of. Now say and feel, I am aware. And just shift as you say these words to yourself and feel. Now just say and feel, I am. Now let go of the I. Shift and feel. Find out, who am I? Where am I aware from? What is everything arising to? That is safe and clear and here. Then say to yourself, when am I? And not going into the past, not anticipating one moment into the future, just letting go of the present time and just being here now. And maybe take a little deeper breath. Now say the first full sentence, but in a different way. I am aware of being your name. Notice how this is a new you. It's the extraordinary and the ordinary. And just notice what's the feeling of this, that which everything is arising to, where you're aware from. So maybe, what do you have to say about this state of mind right now compared to an hour and a half ago? What are you noticing about the state of mind that's here now? You can go ahead and type that to Brittany.
Feeling much calmer, more centered, grounded, feeling into me.
Feeling into me. Beautiful. Thank you all for playing with me this way. Any more, Brittany?
Freeness, free of binds.
Free of binds. Well, thank you all for being here with me today. Here are the last questions for you, just knowing that this is a resource, always accessible, always available. I hope that you were able to find a doorway or two today There are a lot of practices to help you explore these doorways. The important thing is not to do them all or make a project out of this, but find what helps you make this shift into this self-energy, this awake awareness, this true self that's always there underneath the coming and going of parts and our busy lives. And to notice and glimpse and let yourself shift the level of consciousness in your day-to-day life. And you will find that life doesn't need to change a whole lot on the outside, and it completely transforms. If you do need to change something on the outside, this is a really important practice to do, because you can do it with self-leadership and not out of a part. I will say that. So just some little things to pack our toolkit as we close and go home. Maybe just note down what are your doorways into flow no, I'll call it, into your self-energy, knowing the world from a state of flow rather than from a part, And this is going to be different for everybody. What helps you do a U-turn to connect with self in your parts? Remember, we're not getting rid of any parts. We're just realizing where their true place in the family of things is. And today, maybe you could identify a part. Maybe some of you couldn't. That's totally okay, But just know parts are ubiquitous. They're a normal and everyday part of how we function in the world. So even if you didn't meet one today, thank your whole system for its hard work for you. We all have this survival instinct, this desire to move forward in growth and creativity and wanting to connect to the world. So our parts are in service of that. And I hope that maybe today some of your parts could feel that self is here, like the practice at the beginning when we're holding the inner child. We want parts to know that they can soften and rest in self and realize their full potential. They don't need to be stuck in their old jobs. And be really gentle and reflect on, how do I feel towards my parts when they're triggered? Do I get impatient or angry? Those are often other parts, and we just want to invite those parts to soften back. If you're triggered, it's because there's some part of you that's trying to protect you. So just know that, and we just want to understand that. And maybe, if you think of the little parts gathered around you right now, I hope they've been listening and hearing how much we appreciate them and how much they're loved. Maybe ask, what might be one shift I could make this week? Just to live my life from the spaciousness and freedom of self-energy. It might be as simple as just switching the channel out of thought and listening to what that is not thought. This is huge for all of us. So whatever shift you've chosen, maybe just invite your parts to follow you on this adventure. As I said, this is not therapy, and please don't call me for therapy because I'm totally full, but I do have colleagues who do this work of IFS therapy. There's their contact information if you're interested in following up. And I also love teaching this, so this is the QR code. I'll be doing a few what I'm calling play shops, because my parts don't like to work more, but they want to play. A little day-long skills workshop on how you can do this at work, but then also just a lot of resting in the practices in a day-long retreat. So you're welcome to join me at those if you're interested. And as we close, I'd like to just remind you, you do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. You can tell me about your despair, yours, and I will tell you mine, and meanwhile the world goes on. Meanwhile the sun and clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese in the clean blue air are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination and calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. Thank you for being you. And I believe we're at time. We have like 2 minutes if anyone has a few questions.
Thank you so much, Kim. That was so beautiful. We do have a few minutes. We could go till 4:15 if we need. But there is a question for you.
For sure.
How many different parts do we have? Do these parts argue with each other? And can we get rid of a part that we don't like?
Thank you for this question. I wish that there was a guidebook saying how many parts that we have, but this is like a different psychological model. Like a lot of Western psychology was designed thinking of a unitary self. We have like one ego and like that's it, and we have an identity with that ego. And this is rather than the onion in that model where you peel off the layers of the onion and then you get to one single core. This model has been compared to a garlic. If you've ever seen a garlic, there's a lot of little cloves, and they're all part of the same beautiful entity, and they are pretty distinct in and of themselves. So this is for your system to discover, you know. Very often we have a few dominant parts. You know, they're the ones who become strong because they really were the most functional in our lives. And very often those are the ones that we think are ourselves, you know. But then conditions change and that part, you know, loses its job. And that's when there's often a lot of fear in the system. So this part is really, this process rather, is a really important thing to offer, I think, at times of transition. You know, as you're seeing with a lot of your clients, they're losing likely a lot of their identities, their ways of being in the world, maybe even their bodies, you know. And if you understand the self is not being particularly identified with a body or an identity or even a way of thinking, then it's safe, right? It's safe to let go. But if parts of consciousness don't know that self is there, then they're terrified, you know. And so we want to bring a lot of presence and self energy in our work in healthcare. You know, we might not ever be doing parts work with any of our clients or our patients, but the more self energy that there is in the room, the more, in my experience, parts kind of start shifting and dropping their old habits and resting in self effortlessly, which is why I wanted to start with a lot of self energy with all of you, because you don't need to go into IFS training or become an IFS therapist for this to completely revolutionize your healing presence. You can just work with your own system. Yeah.
Beautiful. There was a question about, can it take a long time to get into self, because maybe there's some barriers that might be popping up when trying to get into self.
Right, right. This is why I wanted to start with the flow practice, right? Because I believe very often it's kind of like a mission-oriented, self-like part that takes charge of our healing, and like, got to do a 30-day meditation, and I have to do these 5 certifications, and then, I'll do 10 years of therapy. This might be a strange thing for a therapist to say, but, I think that a lot of healing and unburdening can happen, and it isn't necessarily from therapy. Just watch any part that wants to make a project out of you. Because guess what? I hope you saw in that little flow moment, you're already whole and beautiful. You are so whole and beautiful exactly as you are. And you have all of these parts that have been working so hard. What might they like to do if they knew it was safe? That's often a question I'll ask. Like, what might I like to do if I knew it was safe? And the common answer I find to that question is parts like they want to play, they want to be creative, they want to just have a good time. They don't even want you to quit your job or change your partner or change your name or whatever. They just kind of want a little space in which to play. So as we become more self-led, we start creating a little more space for these parts, and consequently we bring more presence to whatever it is that we're doing. You may still be doing IV drips and changing bed linens, or sitting with people as they transition, and it's the quality of presence that you're bringing to that changes. And you notice with the flow state, it's right there. Yes, I'm a big believer in therapy. I probably could buy a whole cottage with the money I've spent on therapy myself. But I'll tell you, I walk around with a home inside myself, and that is what is really valuable for me, anyway.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Kim. There's another really important question, I think. It asks, how does grief fit into IFS?
Oh, I think it completely fits in IFS, because what do we have to do when we're letting go of something? Whether it's who we think we are, or conditions that we really love and are attached to. This is why self energy is so important, because we're holding space for parts to grieve. It's not about not feeling the grief, it's about having the relative space and resources in which parts can have a full experience of the grief. And I don't know about you, I'll ask the group, what do you notice when your patients can engage in full and healthy grief? What do you notice about them?
Kelly says that they're content
Right.
and connected. I think Val might have wanted to say something too. Sorry.
I think sometimes they have, less physical pain.
Right.
They're better physically.
I see Jennifer wrote peace, healing. Someone wrote they open up. Yeah. Because what is grief other than knowing what's really important to us, right? What a sweet thing to know. And when we can provide safety for our parts, then it's okay to have a full human experience. That's all right. It's okay to have a full human experience. And that puts us in contact with what we so deeply care about.
Thank you so much for that answer, Kim. So it looks like those are all the questions we had in the chat, and we want to thank you so much for being here and sharing so much information with us, but also so much presence with us, and all those practices that we can take into our lives. And we also want to thank everybody for being here. And I know that Carl dropped a link to an evaluation for all of you to complete. And we want to thank even Val and all the other speakers that were here, because today was a really wonderful day. And everybody's comments in the chat about thank you for the day, we really appreciate all of those comments as well.
I'll just echo your thanks, and Kim especially, like the fact that you gave us your whole day. Like I know probably as the last speaker of the day, it was probably helpful for you to know what we heard about and learned in the rest of the day. But we really do appreciate you and everything you brought to this last session. I feel like we've just kind of scraped the surface with the work that you've shared with us. But luckily, I work with lots of people who know lots about it, so we needed a debrief.
Yeah, so for the evaluation, I just have the link there in the chat. So if you're able to complete that, we'd really appreciate that. It really helps us with planning these sessions in the future.